The Battle of Actium in 31 BC was more than just a military confrontation. It represented a turning point in the history of Rome, a moment that sealed the fate of the empire and determined who would truly rule the known world at the time. Imagine a divided Rome, weakened and on the brink of collapse, with powerful leaders vying for supremacy. On one side was Octavian, a young strategist with great ambitions to consolidate power, but without an empire to call his own. On the other was Mark Antony, an ally of the powerful Cleopatra, who already controlled vast lands and wealth and was ready to challenge the Roman order. But behind this naval battle in the Ionian Sea, there was something much greater at stake: the future of a nation and the rise of a new empire. Octavian knew that this would be his only chance to change everything and ensure that Rome would not be destroyed by its own internal conflicts. The defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra not only destroyed the plans of a rival empire in the east, but also sealed the end of the Roman Republic and ushered in a new chapter, the birth of the Roman Empire. Now, you may be wondering, how does this battle, with so many details and complex characters, impact our lives today? The answer lies in the power of decision. Octavian's choice to trust his allies and strategies, even in the face of such a difficult situation, changed the course of all history. The battle was not just a matter of military strength, it was a lesson in leadership, vision, and courage. When you understand what happened on this pivotal day, you will realize that, like Rome, we all face battles in our lives. Moments of decision that, if seized well, can lead to powerful transformation. If Octavian could change the history of Rome, you too have the power to shape your own destiny. Let's explore the details of this historic battle together and discover how it not only destroyed an empire, but also forged one that would endure for centuries, and how you can apply these lessons to your own journey. Before we dive into the next topic, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because what follows is a series of incredible videos that will help you better understand the history of Rome and how it can inspire your personal journey. Don't miss any of the content. On September 2nd, 31 BC, a significant naval battle occurred near Actium promontory in Greece, involving giant warships and fierce fighting to determine Rome's leader. This battle would forever change the Roman Empire's fate, with Octavian and Mark Antony, alongside Queen Cleopatra, at its center. Following Julius Caesar's assassination, Rome was in turmoil, divided among leaders vying for power. Octavian, Caesar's great-nephew, emerged as Mark Antony's rival. Their dispute over Rome's rule involved many allies, including Cleopatra, who allied with Mark Antony. Mark Antony and Cleopatra formed a strong partnership, wielding Egypt's power and a large army. Cleopatra provided wealth, food, and soldiers, dreaming of restoring Egypt's power with Mark Antony's help. Octavian, opposing them, had Rome's army and support from skilled general Marcus Agrippa. The tension between the sides extended beyond battle to who would be Rome's hero. Octavian painted Mark Antony as a traitor influenced by Cleopatra, prioritizing Egypt over Rome. This portrayal turned many Romans against Mark Antony, who saw Octavian as inexperienced. The conflict between Octavian and Mark Antony became personal. Cleopatra was seen as a villain aiming to take Rome, and Mark Antony, allied with her, became an enemy. This narrative of betrayal and ambition intensified the war, making the Battle of Actium a point of no return. The battle was a massive naval confrontation, with fleets facing off at sea. Mark Antony and Cleopatra's fleet consisted of heavy, powerful ships, while Octavian, through Agrippa, commanded smaller, agile vessels, ideal for a sea battle where speed and strategy were crucial. The beginning of the battle was marked by rapid attacks and complex strategies. Octavian's general, Agrippa, was extremely cunning. He surrounded the enemy fleet, making it difficult for Mark Antony's and Cleopatra's ships to maneuver. This left Mark Antony's large ships at a disadvantage. And in the midst of all the fighting, something happened that turned the tide. Cleopatra, seeing the situation becoming untenable, decided to flee. With her escape, Mark Antony, in despair, also abandoned the battle and followed the queen. Cleopatra's retreat was a fatal blow to the morale of Mark Antony's troops. Without the leadership of both, the Egyptian forces were lost and disorganized. This made it easier for Octavian to win. The naval victory was quick, and Mark Antony's defeat was humiliating. His soldiers began to surrender, and many were captured by Octavian's forces. The path was clear for Octavian to achieve ultimate victory, but the impact of this battle would be even more profound. After their defeat, Mark Antony and Cleopatra took refuge in Egypt, but history had already been decided. Their fate was sealed. In 30 BC, Octavian marched to Alexandria, where Mark Antony and Cleopatra were hiding. When Mark Antony learned that Cleopatra was already dead, he committed suicide in a state of devastation. Shortly thereafter, Cleopatra also took her own life, and Egypt fell under Octavian's control. He was now the sole leader of Rome. With the death of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian became the central figure of Rome. In 27 BC, he was officially proclaimed Augustus by the Senate. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in Roman history, the Roman Empire. He was no longer just a military or political leader, he became the first emperor of Rome, with absolute powers. Octavian's victory at Actium was not just a military battle, it was a turning point for Rome. The Roman Republic, with its complex politics and internal strife, was over. In its place was an empire that dominated large parts of the world for over 500 years. Octavian's victory cemented a centralized system of power and began the age of the emperors, marked by great expansion and conquest. But the real change was the transition from a Rome at civil war to a Rome unified under a single ruler. The stability that Octavian brought was what allowed the Roman Empire to thrive for so long. The Battle of Actium was the final piece of this great change, and without it, the history of Rome might have been very different. Looking back at the Battle of Actium, we can see how a single moment, a single decision, can change the entire trajectory of a nation. The future of Rome was decided there. The battle not only altered Roman politics, but also defined the way the Western world would be governed for centuries. Therefore, the Battle of Actium is not only remembered as a fight between two armies, but as the point where the Roman Empire began its journey to become one of the greatest powers the world has ever seen. After Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Rome faced chaos, unsure of its next ruler. Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate to restore order. Initially, the triumvirate seemed successful, but disagreements arose. Lepidus was sidelined, and rivalry between Octavian and Mark Antony intensified, leading to open war. Mark Antony allied with Cleopatra in Egypt, gaining wealth and a powerful fleet, posing a threat to Octavian and Rome. Octavian countered by manipulating Roman opinion, portraying Mark Antony as Cleopatra's puppet and a traitor to Rome. Octavian convinced the Roman Senate to declare war on Cleopatra and label Mark Antony an enemy of Rome, isolating him. By 32 BC, Octavian's support grew, while Mark Antony relied on Cleopatra, making him vulnerable. A final showdown loomed. Mark Antony, seen as submissive to Cleopatra, faced immense pressure. The war became a matter of honor and strategy, relying on Cleopatra's aid. The situation became even more complicated when Octavian, through his propaganda, managed to convince the Senate that Cleopatra's presence in Mark Antony's life represented a great threat to Rome itself. Octavian knew that the power of Cleopatra and Egypt should not be underestimated, and he used this to his advantage to further divide Mark Antony's forces. For Octavian, any victory for Mark Antony would mean the loss of Rome to a foreign ruler. Octavian not only knew how to manipulate the emotions of the Romans, but he also used his political skills to win allies. He got other Roman senators and leaders to join him against Mark Antony, and in doing so he formed a powerful coalition. On Mark Antony's side, the situation was becoming increasingly difficult. he was surrounded with few allies and much more dependent on Cleopatra's help. His position became increasingly isolated, and his image in the eyes of the Romans was destroyed. As Octavian's propaganda gained momentum, Mark Antony was feeling increasingly pressured. He knew that his only chance was to throw himself into battle with all the forces he could muster, counting on the help of Cleopatra and her army. But even then, the situation was far from favorable for him. Octavian had an enormous political and military advantage, and war seemed only a matter of time. The rivalry between Octavian and Mark Antony had reached a point of no return. There was no room for reconciliation anymore, and both were ready to face each other to the end. The battle for control of Rome was about to happen, and the consequences would be profound, not only for the two men, but for the entire city of Rome. Whoever emerged victorious from this war would not only be the leader of Rome, but also the one responsible for changing the history of the Roman Empire forever. The unfolding war between Octavian and Mark Antony was about to change everything. Every move they made, every decision they made, would define the future not only of Rome, but also of the known world at that time. Octavian wanted to be the sole ruler of Rome, while Mark Antony, with the help of Cleopatra, believed he had the power to defeat him. But the truth was that Rome was about to be changed forever, and no one yet knew what the real impact of this war would be. With war declared, the future of Rome was at stake. It was a fight between two men who had different visions for the future of one of the greatest powers of the ancient world. Whoever emerged victorious from the war would not only take control of Rome, but would also be remembered as the person responsible for the most significant change in the city's history. So, did you know that the Battle of Actium was a major turning point in the history of Rome, changing the course of the ancient world forever? Have you ever heard of this decisive confrontation that sealed the fate of Rome and marked the end of the Republic? Now, imagine a divided Rome, weakened and on the verge of collapse, where everything could have taken a completely different course. What would have happened if the outcome had been different? Tell us in the comments if you already knew about this epic battle and its importance. If this topic interests you, leave your opinion and share this knowledge. We are curious to know what you think. Let's imagine a great battle taking place at sea, in the Ionian Sea, between two great forces that were about to decide the future of Rome. On one side was Mark Antony, the Roman general, and his powerful ally Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. Together, they commanded a fleet of 500 ships, an impressive number of vessels that were true giants of war. These ships were not only large, but also very heavy, designed to face any enemy head-on. They were equipped for battles in which direct confrontation would be the key, with powerful warships ready to collide with their opponents and destroy anything that stood in their way. This fleet was immense, and with it, Mark Antony had around 70,000 soldiers. Just imagine, an entire army ready to fight alongside a powerful fleet of ships. These soldiers were strong and experienced, ready to disembark and fight whatever was necessary to ensure victory. Mark Antony's forces were undoubtedly prepared for a direct confrontation. On the other hand, on the opposing side was Octavian, who would soon become Emperor Augustus, and his great military leader Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, an extremely skilled commander. Although Octavian's fleet was somewhat smaller, with 400 ships, it was extremely effective and well-trained. Octavian's advantage lay in the agility of his ships, which were smaller, faster, and much more maneuverable. His ships were designed to cut through the water quickly, allowing them to move quickly and make quick attacks before retreating to safe positions. Octavian knew that, unlike Mark Antony's fleet, he could not fight head-on. Instead, he planned to use his fast ships to encircle and attack by surprise, taking advantage of his fleet's mobility. He had around 80,000 troops, even more than Mark Antony, which gave him an advantage in terms of firepower. However, his ships were smaller, which meant that he would have to rely much more on quick maneuvers and clever strategy. Mark Antony's ships, being heavier, were like huge floating fortresses that could crush any ship that tried to engage them at close range. They had great firepower and were designed to withstand the strongest attacks. Octavian's ships, on the other hand, were lighter, which made them faster but also more vulnerable in direct confrontations. Therefore, the coming battle would not only be a question of numbers, but also of strategy and skill in commanding the troops and ships. The choice between brute force and speed was clear. Mark Antony believed that with the size and strength of his ships he could dominate the sea, while Octavian trusted in the ability of his agile fleet to confuse the enemy and attack when they least expected it. The battle at sea would undoubtedly be a game of cat and mouse, in which whoever had the most skill and strategic intelligence would have the advantage. Octavian's fleet, with its smaller ships, could move quickly to where it was needed, allowing him to attack weak points in Mark Antony's fleet. Furthermore, the agility of Octavian's ships helped him avoid heavy attacks from enemy ships. This was an important advantage, as their rapid movement allowed Octavian to exploit Mark Antony's weaknesses while avoiding the enemy fleet's strengths. On the other hand, Mark Antony believed that the only way to win was to face the enemy head-on, using his larger and more powerful ships to crush Octavian's fleet. He counted on the support of Cleopatra and the enormous strength of his army, which had the power to withstand attacks and hold out for longer. For him, the key to victory lay in a frontal battle, where his strength could be decisive. However, Mark Antony knew that his fleet was slower, which meant that he would have to be extremely careful when dealing with Octavian's fast ships. He would need to use his heavy vessels to block the routes and try to capture Octavian's smaller ships. But the big question was, could Mark Antony reach Octavian's fast ships before they could quickly move to a safer point? That was the question that hung in the air before the clash. Octavian, on the other hand, was determined not to make the mistake of engaging in direct combat. He knew that if he did, his fleet would be overwhelmed by the force of Mark Antony's massive ships. So his strategy was clear: strike quickly, with precision, without giving the enemy a chance to get close enough to use their strength effectively. He trusted his commander Agrippa to orchestrate every move of the fleet and ensure that the speed of his ships was used to the best advantage. Cleopatra, who was at Mark Antony's side, was also aware of Octavian's advantage in agility. She was aware that if the battle were won on speed, Mark Antony's chances of victory would be slim. She believed that the strength of the Egyptian fleet, together with Mark Antony's powerful ships, would be enough to ensure control of the sea and, consequently, victory. However, this confidence was based on a mistaken assessment of the situation, as Octavian was well prepared to face this strategy. The battle would then be not only a question of numbers, but also of who could best exploit the advantages of their fleet. Mark Antony's large, powerful ships would have to fight to block Octavian's swift maneuvers. Octavian's smaller ships would need to be fast enough to strike accurately before the enemy fleet had a chance to react. The contrast between the two fleets, both in terms of size and strategy, made this one of the most exciting and unpredictable battles in history. While Mark Antony prepared to face his enemy with brute force, Octavian relied on his ability to maneuver and strike with precision. The real fight would be between the strength of the large ships and the speed of the smaller ones. Whoever mastered this dynamic would be the winner of the battle. The Battle of Actium was a true test of intelligence, strategy, and courage. It began with a clever move by Agrippa, Octavian's commander, who used his agile fleet to cut off supplies to Mark Antony's large ships, weakening them. Mark Antony's large ships struggled to maneuver, getting in each other's way, while Octavian's lighter, faster ships attacked and fled easily, gaining a huge advantage. The battle grew tense as Mark Antony's forces lost control. Cleopatra, ally of Mark Antony, decided to flee with her fleet, sensing the dire situation. Seeing Cleopatra flee, Mark Antony felt lost and decided to retreat as well, leaving his fleet disorganized and demoralized, with soldiers losing morale. Without leadership, Mark Antony's soldiers gave up, and his once great force lay in ruins. Octavian's forces, concentrated and knowing victory was near, pressed on. During the engagement, Octavian and Agrippa's strategies shone through. They had accomplished what seemed impossible, defeating a much larger fleet of large ships with their smaller, faster, and better coordinated vessels. While Mark Antony and Cleopatra tried to hold out, Octavian seemed to always be one step ahead. His ships were like arrows in the sea, striking quickly and disappearing before the enemy could prepare to react. The consequences of this defeat were devastating for Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Their attempt to rule together and defy Octavian was destroyed that day. Mark Antony was unable to regain his position and, feeling defeated and directionless, fled to Egypt, where he and Cleopatra would eventually commit suicide, ending their attempt to create a new empire together. For Octavian, however, the victory meant that he was about to become the new emperor of Rome. With the escape of Mark Antony and the surrender of his soldiers, Octavian had no further difficulty in conquering the territories controlled by the enemy. He took control of Rome, and from that moment on, the Roman Republic came to an end. The Roman Empire began to form. Octavian became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, marking the beginning of a new era. The Battle of Actium was, without a doubt, the moment that sealed the fate of Rome. It was not just a naval victory, but the victory of Octavian over all his enemies. From that day on, Rome would never be the same again. The Republic, which had ruled for so long, was replaced by the Empire, and Octavian became the supreme leader. When we think about this battle, we can see that it was not decided by brute force alone, but by the intelligence of those who knew where to attack and when to retreat. It was a game of strategy in which Octavian, with his cunning and skill, was able to defeat a larger and stronger enemy. He took advantage of Mark Antony's weaknesses and used his own strengths to his advantage. In the end, Octavian proved that sometimes speed and intelligence are more powerful than strength. After the victory, Rome began to expand even further under the rule of Augustus. The Roman Empire gained greater control over the known world at the time, with a stability that lasted for centuries. But all of this was only possible because, in 31 BC, Octavian won the Battle of Actium, and this changed the destiny of Rome and the ancient world forever. The defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, with their flight and the surrender of their soldiers, marked the end of an era of great war and uncertainty for Rome. With Octavian at the helm, Rome began to enter a period of prosperity and expansion. Although the empire faced challenges over time, the legacy of Octavian, the first emperor, endured for centuries, and the story of that battle became a crucial milestone in the building of the greatest empire the world has ever known. The Battle of Actium, then, was not just about ships and soldiers. It was a battle of destinies, where control of Rome and the formation of the Roman Empire were decided. It showed that sometimes the most important victories come not only from physical strength, but from the ability to use intelligence to turn the tide in your favor. Before we move on to the next topic, I noticed that you haven't liked this video yet. This is super important because it helps YouTube to share our content with more people, and so we can continue to bring you more information to help you. So, don't waste time, leave your like here, it's free and makes all the difference. Thanks. Octavian's victory in the Battle of Actium was a decisive moment in the history of Rome. Imagine that this battle was the turning point between an old way of governing, the Roman Republic, and the new and great Roman Empire. If Rome had previously been ruled by many senators, with Octavian's victory, Rome was ruled by a single leader, the emperor. But why was this battle so important? Well, after the victory, Octavian not only secured control of Rome, but also made Egypt, a rich and powerful land, part of his empire. Egypt not only had an incredible culture, but also had many resources, such as grain. These resources were essential to feed the vast populations of the empire. This Egyptian treasure helped Octavian strengthen his position as emperor, ensuring that Rome's economy grew even more. Now, think about it. What if the battle had had a different outcome? If Mark Antony and Cleopatra had won, they could have created an empire of their own, but in the east, rivaling Rome. As a result, the world could have been very different. Rome might not have become the world power that it did. But because Octavian won, it ensured that Rome would become the ruler of the known world. This event, Octavian's victory, was not just a battle won, but the foundation of something much greater. Octavian's supremacy over his rivals was a key point in Rome's ever-expanding empire. With his victory, he not only destroyed the plans of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, but paved the way for the Roman Empire to flourish for centuries, dominating vast lands and cultures. In short, the Battle of Actium was not just a military victory. It was the key that unlocked a future of greatness for Rome, and the defeat of its enemies established an empire that would make history for millennia. What Octavian did there, by winning, was much more than conquering land and wealth. He transformed the destiny of the ancient world and showed that Rome's power would be almost unbeatable. He created a foundation that would withstand many challenges in the centuries to come. And so we come to the end of this journey through the Battle of Actium, the conflict that not only defined the future of Rome, but also changed the course of world history. Octavian, with his brilliant strategy and unwavering courage, was able to turn the defeat of his rivals into a great victory that gave rise to the Roman Empire, one of the most powerful and enduring empires in history. Now, with all this knowledge, it is important that you continue to pay attention to how decisive moments can shape destinies, whether in the history of great empires or in your own life. The choices we make, as well as the battles we face, can have much greater repercussions than we imagine. So remember, what defines the true strength of a leader is not the absence of challenges, but the ability to transform adversity into conquest. Stay tuned, because there will always be battles to be fought, and how you face them could be what defines your own empire. Until the next video, and keep learning from history.